Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Riley Woolner today. I was on Reddit and I was over at r/Bigfoot, I think is how you say it. And I noticed there was an interesting post there from an individual that had some really interesting things happen related to Bigfoot things. So I reached out and Riley said, yeah, I definitely will come on the show and share what happened to me. So Riley, how's it going, man?
Doing good, man. How about you?
Dude, I'm just having a good time working on podcast stuff and talking to people about their Bigfoot encounters. And I mean, I can't complain. Life is good. So how about yourself?
Same, man. I'm just working. Just had me and my wife had our first kid, so we're enjoying that whole adventure. And yeah, I'm excited to talk Bigfoot today. So,
dude, congratulations. That's a huge change in your life, but it'll bring you into some amazing events that you won't be able to remember what it was like before you had a kid. In good ways,
yeah,
and in bad ways. So it's a good stuff. But man, let's get right into it. So Riley, kind of paint the picture of how you got into this whole Bigfoot thing and what part of the country we're looking into and all that good stuff.
Awesome. So, yeah, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Most of my, where I was raised was in Oregon. I did live in Washington for a few years as a kid. But yeah, most of this is, I've grown up in the Willamette Valley, spent time on the coast. And I've also, some of the events that I'll talk about actually took place in some of the places where I went to college. So out in Idaho and Utah. But yeah, most of what has occurred for me has been in the great state of Oregon. So, the way I got into it, I mean, growing up in Oregon, I mean, Bigfoot's kind of like the mascot of the Pacific Northwest, and of the outdoors in general, kind of. And, I knew, of course, growing up, hearing campfire stories about Bigfoot, always thought it was a fun topic, and I always wondered, like, hey, it could be real. I had kind of an open mind about it, but it wasn't something I took like super seriously until I was, this was probably the summer of 2018 when I was working on a ferry, and the ferry captain was a dude who I'll call Shane, but me and him were talking, and one time I just kind of brought up, I was like, hey man, what do you think about the whole Bigfoot, like, in Sasquatch stuff? And he like looked me dead in the eyes and was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, do you think it could be real? And he's like, oh yeah, those are real. And I was like dumbstruck because he said it with such sincerity and he was not messing around, and he's not really the type to really joke around like that. And I was like, wait, what do you mean they're real? Like, how do you know that? And he's like, I've seen them. And I said, you've seen them? Like, what do you tell me? Okay, hold on. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm like, I want to hear, man. He's like, you're just going to make fun of me. And I said, no, dude, I'm serious. Like, I'm open. I'm wanting to hear what your story is. And so he told me a story about a time when he was hunting in the Blues, which is in the Blues Mountains, which are in eastern Oregon. And his story was that he came across a mother and a juvenile, and that they like kind of met in like a crossroads area while he was elk hunting. And it was kind of snowy, he said. And I think from what I remember, basically the mama one like picked up the baby and like gave a roar in his direction, and he was kind of like partially hidden, but he knew it was looking right at him. And then they kind of like started hiking up the hill, And I think from what he said that there were some footprints of the baby in the snow, and the mom like shuffled around the snow with her foot to like get rid of the footprints before they like trekked up the hill. And for him, it was like a very like, intense, like visceral experience because, he had no idea that these things were real. And he ended up going back to where his dad was. His dad and him were the ones hunting. And then kind of, I think he said he let his dad know, and his dad was like, "Oh, you've seen him too." And like that was his kind of story. And that for me kind of just blew my mind because this guy had no real reason to lie to me. And he seemed so sincere. And so it made me question some of the old campfire stories that I had heard some of my buddies in high school tell. So I ended up talking with them, and I can talk about those maybe later on in the episode, but it's got me on this trail of wonder. I'm like, dude, is this, is Sasquatch real? So I started trying to learn as much about it as I could. And then I think probably what I would consider my first encounter was what I think could have been a possible encounter was in 2019. I was going to school at Rexburg, Idaho. And I went on a hike at a place called Moody Creek, which is this is southeastern Idaho, and it's kind of close, more or less, to the Wyoming border. And when I was on that hike, I was by myself, and I came up this trail, and I was overlooking out this ridge, and in the forest behind me, I heard like a loud like snap, like a limb being popped. And it was probably the size of these limbs that were being broken were probably like, the end of a baseball bat, like not the thick side, but the thinner side. Like if someone were to like step on that or just break it over their knee or something, that was the kind of stuff I was hearing. And at first I thought like, okay, maybe this is a cow because they do allow for like free range cows in a lot of this was in the Caribou Targhee National Forest, is where I was hiking. And I thought like, oh, maybe it's a cow, but I turned around and I could see on the ridge, it was a bit above me elevation wise, but I could see something real dark and real tall, like just beyond my line of sight in the trees. And I was frozen there. I just felt this like, oh my gosh, like if this is what I think it could be, like I have nothing to like protect myself with. Like I don't hike with a gun, or I didn't even have bear spray at the time or anything. I was just on my own. And so I hid behind this big boulder, and then it still kept on moving around. And then I threw a rock in the direction of it. Cause I tried to say, I'm like, hey, like if you're a person, like come on out. Like, what are you doing? Like, and they never responded. And so usually if you throw a rock, like the cow is going to get kind of spooked and run off, but this thing just stayed exactly where it was. And so that freaked me out. And then it basically like stood there for a while and made more snapping sounds. And then just a little bit later, I basically hightailed it out of there. And as I was running down, as I ran down the trail, because I was, a little bit scared of what it possibly could have been. And as I was going down the trail, I kept on hearing like more of these sort of snapping sounds to my right and to my left as I was running back down the trail, kind of fast walking to my truck. And I was like, dude, I'm trying to not let myself think that I was I'm like, am I imagining this? Like, is there something like, pacing me out? Like, what's going on? But I eventually got to my truck and then headed out of there. And that was like the first time where I was like, maybe that was a Sasquatch. Like, I don't know. So fast forward about a year, in 2020, my wife and I had moved to Utah for a student teaching that I was doing down there. And we went for me and her and one of my best friends, we all went for an overnighter in Little Cottonwood Canyon. So for those who are familiar with Utah, that's where we were at. And this is in kind of like northern central-ish Utah. And we were camping that night. It was the end of summer, so it was really dry. And a ranger lady came and told us that we couldn't have a fire. We had already started the fire, so we kind of doused it out, but there was still some embers left and some coals. So it was just me and my wife and my buddy, and we were around the fire, and my wife said that she wanted to go to bed. And so she went off to the tent, which was a few yards away from the fire. And as she was laying there for a while, it was quiet. And then my buddy and we were just chatting, and my wife said, "Hey," like she kind of called to us. She's like, "Do you guys hear that?" And we're like, "Hear what?" And she's like, "It sounds like there's something breathing over here." And I was like, "Breathing? What do you mean?" She's like, "Is there an animal near the tent?" And we went over and walked over there, and like we were like quiet and tried to listen to what she was saying. And like, this is how it seems to so often be sometimes with these experiences. It felt like there was like this deep guttural breathing, but it was just beyond like our ears' ability to like fully hear it really well. But like that's what we were kind of picking up on. My buddy, who's like, he's very against any of the idea of like, not against, but he's more cynical when it comes to any of this subject and stuff like that. So he, I think, was trying to write it off as just like a trick of the wind or something like that, because it was amidst a bunch of quaking aspens. So when the wind blows through those trees, it kind of sounds like a jingling coins almost. And he was like, "Oh, it's probably just the wind." And so anyways, we were like, "That's really weird," but it kind of stopped eventually, and we went to bed. And then that next morning, I woke up to the sound of what I thought was it sounded kind of like a baby bear or like maybe a moose or something. It was like this bleh kind of sound. And I was like, for whatever reason, I just had, this was probably super stupid, but like that, I almost felt like possessed with this like mad energy of like, I want to go see this. It's like, felt exciting. So I threw on my shoes, and because it was close enough to the tent in the forest area behind us that I felt like I was going to see whatever this was. I don't know what I was thinking, because if it was a bear or a moose, like they could have, you know, caused some problems. But it started, like the sound started trailing off deeper into the forest, and I started pursuing it. And then eventually it got to a point where I couldn't hear it anymore, but where I found myself was amidst a bunch of these, what I knew after having researched this topic a bit, like what people often will attribute to Bigfoot, these sort of tree formation things. They were like all these little like teepee things. There was like a couple small ones, and then there was like this one that was just huge. Just like all um these like sticks that were all like leaned up against this one big log, and like this log that, or not this log, but it was like this tree trunk that had been pulled out of the ground, and its roots were like up in the air, and it's like the end of the top of the tree was like pushed into the ground, like someone yanked it out and left it there, and then they piled up a bunch of smaller sticks up against it. And it was like, a thick enough trunk of a tree that I could like walk up and down it. And I was like, dude, to my buddy, I was like, could have pulled this out? Like, why would the roots of the tree be up in the air? And he was just like, I don't know, man, nature's weird. And I was like, I knew better. I was like, dude, I think this is something related to the whole Sasquatch phenomenon. And so that was something that I thought was like kind of one of the first times where I'm like, felt like I was seeing signs of, these beings or creatures or whatever they are.
Riley, real quick.
So
I
yeah.
want to comment on that, because that's a really interesting scenario. Do you think that you were being led to that area by that sound, perhaps?
I mean, looking back on it, it feels like that, which kind of spooks me out because I'm like, that's really weird. But at the same time, like in that moment, it definitely kind of felt just like I was, chasing after something, and I happened to come across, they didn't seem really connected in my mind, but I look back and I'm like, oh, that's a kind of a weird circumstance. So, and people will say like, oh, these Bigfoot creatures, they can imitate anything. And, that's highly convenient, of course, from a skeptic's perspective, but at the same time though, I'm like, well, it did kind of, like you said, like it almost seemed like it led me into finding these tree formations. So yeah.
I can say 100%. So I used to be in that camp where it's like, yeah, it's highly convenient until I actually experienced that and someone talking back and forth via mimic bird noises. And I'm telling you, dude, like it's legit. Like it's the wildest thing you'll ever experience once you are able to actually experience that mimic.
Yeah, and like identify it.
Oh my goodness, it's so weird.
Yeah, dude, that's spooky, man. Like that, because that feeling of like you don't know what it can imitate anything. Like you don't know if you're actually interacting with an animal or this thing, which is wild. But yeah, so that was after that though. We just explored around that area where all the tree formations were and these little like teepee looking formations, and then we headed out. Like that was it. So I'm trying to think. Probably about. It seems like I have within the past few years since I've been interested in this subject. I only ever really have some kind of experience like once a year. Even though I do go out, try to get out and go hiking and experience the outdoors as often as I can. I don't often get to go into like real remote areas. Often I'm need to be somewhere closer to home. So, but every once in a while, I'll have a time where I'm able to get out more, and often there'll be something possibly related, that has to do with this. So I think about another year later, like 2021, my wife and I had moved back home to Oregon, and we were living in Silverton. And for those who aren't aware, it's near Silver Falls State Park, which is one of the more, I think, like tourist kind of attractions of Oregon that people will come to. It's beautiful, gorgeous area. And I had met this old timer at church who I was up giving I guess what someone would call like a sermon. And I was just up there introducing myself first. And I had kind of, I guess I think what I said was like, in my spare time, I kind of tongue in cheek was like, I like to go hunting for Bigfoot. And it made like the what do you call it? Not the crowd, but the
congregation.
Congregation, thank you. The congregation kind of chuckle. But then this old timer came up to me afterwards. He's like, "Hey, you serious about going, squatching?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." Because I'm trying to figure out if he's legit about it or if he's like, gonna try and mess with me. And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, hey, you never know. They could be out there, And he's like, "Oh yeah, they're out there." He's like, "We should get lunch sometime." I'm like, "Oh yeah, dude, let's do it." So we ended up going to this place called the Wooden Nickel, and it was like this awesome, like, Western saloon style place, and we're at this getting just lunch together, and he pulls out, and he's probably in his I'll call him Sean, and he's got to be in his 60s, probably 70s, and he pulls out this hand-drawn map of the area of all the different like wilderness surrounding the Silverton area. And he's just like, he's like, me and my friends back in the 60s and 70s, like we would track these things, and we've mapped out all the places where the family groups reside in the area. And I was like, mind blown. I was like, holy cow, like, are you serious? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, and he told me his experience about how he'd seen one. And so it was really cool to sort of come across someone, an old timer who'd really put in the work, boots on the ground. And he had some pretty wild stories that were also kind of in the realm of the supernatural that he'd experienced while out with some of his friends, back in the day, that were sort of Sasquatch related, but different. We can go into that a bit later too, but he showed me this recording he had of a Bigfoot like scream, right? Like, and it was bone chilling. He just like pulled it out with an old school recorder, pushed play for me, and like I was able to hear it, and it sounded like the Nazgul from the Lord of the Rings, right? Like, but much deeper as well. And it just was like, I was like I said, bone chilling, man. It was terrifying, but also like just super cool. So I was like, well, let's get out and see if we can, spot anything. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll take you up to one of our hot spots. So a few days later, I go with him in his truck, and we head up into these logging roads, and we're up there where no one else is around us, right? There's no other trucks or cars. It's just us in this one area, and there's this trail that the truck can't actually get up to. It's only meant for like a Kubota or like a four-wheeler or something, right? And so we start walking up this trail, and as we're walking along, I'm starting to see about like 8 feet in the air, like uniformly, seeing these branches of these trees, these pine trees that are all they're all like snapped and like bent in the same direction, and they're all kind of like pointing down towards this trail, but they're all on the same sides of each tree that goes along. And I recognize that from a lot of like hearing from the Native American folklore and just sort of the stuff that gets attributed to the whole Bigfoot phenomenon. And I was like, Sean, like, are these what I think they are? And he's like, hey, good eye. Like, I often have to point those out to people. And I was like, well, I mean, that's weird. Like, that wouldn't be something that like loggers would do, because this is like fresh young timber that's losing money if they were to just break off branches. And these are not small branches either. They're like pretty hefty sized, and you can tell that they're fresh. It's not from like winter over time, like, where they just sort of break on their own. Like, they're splintering, like they've just been pulled. And so they're kind of going along, and when we come up over this ridge, I sort of peek my head into the forest a bit, just because I'm looking around trying to see anything I possibly can. And I see they look like when gorillas like nest down, these like spots in the forest where there's like everything's crushed and it's all like a place where something would lay down or sit. And I was like, Sean, like, are these places where you think they could sleep or something? Like, and because they obviously hadn't been there for a long while. Like, this was all that stuff that was crushed down was really old. And he's like, yeah, I mean, they could have been here this last winter, but it's definitely been a while since they were over here in those particular spots. And we get up to the top, and he's kind of old school when it comes to like how he goes about trying to like, interact with these things. So he just lets out this big bellow, and he's like, tries to make a Sasquatch call essentially. We don't hear anything. He's talked about how he often they do return the call. But eventually we head back down to the truck, and we're just sitting there, and I say, I'm going to go by myself back up the hill. And he's like, all right, that's cool. So I start walking up there, and I hear something in the forest next to me, like beyond my line of sight, like in the trees. And it starts kind of like, every time I take a step, it takes a step. Every time I, stop, it stops. It doesn't sound huge though. It sounds small. I'm like, is this just like a weird raccoon or a deer or something? Like, or could it be one of these things? But it was weird that it did sort of seem to follow my moves. I eventually kind of got, like, as a little, once I got to the top of the ridge and this thing was still doing that, I kind of was like, all right, I'm out of here. So I started like fast walking back down towards the truck. We get in there. I don't say anything to Sean because I don't want the power of suggestion to like affect his opinion on what was happening. So we're just sitting there, and to our right, out of nowhere, this like rock. It's not a huge rock. It's probably the size of like an eraser or something. It gets chucked from the forest at our windshield, and it chips and like scrapes in the windshield and leaves a line. And both of us, we jump, and we're like, what the heck was that? And we like try and stay quiet and look out that way, and we don't see anything. But I asked him, I was like, okay, what was that? Like, he's like, well, let's go over what the possibilities are. And I was like, okay, I get him, like, was it a bird? Like, and he's like, I don't think birds can throw it from an angle, like, because it came from our right, and it like scratched across the windshield. I was like, maybe like a deer kicked it. And he's like, that is possible. But it does seem, once again, like it could have been more, I don't know, like that I don't know, we would have seen a deer, I feel like, if that was the case, and we didn't see anything over there. And I was like, maybe, I guess it could have been like a ranger, but that's a really weird thing for a ranger to do, especially when they don't know if us two dudes in the truck are armed or not. Like, or if it's some kid, but like we're out in the middle of nowhere. And if it was a ranger, usually they would let themselves be known. So it was a very, spooky kind of experience, or eerie, I should say, because it's like, dude, something threw a rock at us. And then that's when I told Sean what I had experienced. And he's like, oh, I'll bet that was a juvenile that was walking alongside you and it came down the trail with you. And then it was, messing with us by throwing that rock at the windshield. And I forgot, we had previously, before we started walking on the trail, we had just gotten out of the truck and he was sort of interacting back and forth with this owl. With like you were saying, I don't know if it was an owl or not, because it would kind of hoot at the same, hoot back and forth with him, and then it was gone and we didn't hear from it again. But yeah, so I know that's another common thing that I've heard people talk about, is that they'll often try and imitate owls. I don't know if that's what the case was or not, but it was that was, I think, for me, one of the first times where I was like, okay, this is something I think I need to start taking more seriously, because this really actually interacted with me. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love to focus on this. I mean, that's an incredible, like, that's the time where pretty much you got pushed way over into the 100%. I know exactly what you were feeling in that situation, because I just experienced that in Oregon. And dude, crazy. So this was right after lunch, you said?
This was actually a few days after that lunch.
Or sorry, what time of day did this happen at?
It was probably like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. We stayed until probably like 5 or 6.
Wow. And he was kind of talking back and forth with an owl, huh?
Yeah, that's what we were hearing, at least.
Did it sound kind of weird, or like it was off a little bit, or louder than a normal owl, or anything like that?
It's been a few years, so I'm trying not to like project my own memories or confuse memories of other people's stories onto it or anything. But from what I, take this with a grain of salt, I do feel like I remember it kind of sounding like an owl with a cough, because it would be like he would go, "Whoo," Sean would, and then it would go, "Whoo, whoo, whoo," back, and it almost sounded like it didn't know fully how to sound like an owl, which, like I said, like, am I projecting my thoughts / hope that it's a Bigfoot like onto this situation? Possibly, but I think I do clearly remember that it sounded pretty weird. Like it was an owl that, like I said, sounded like it had a cough or a stutter.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with the Olympic Project?
I have heard that's up in Washington, right?
Yeah, the Olympic Peninsula, and how they found the nests up there.
Oh no, I'm not. That's pretty awesome.
Okay, so your story is very interesting. So from what it sounded like you said, is you were up there and you saw kind of like gorilla type nests on the ground.
That's what my exposure to what gorilla nests look like is based off of, National Geographic and Disney's Tarzan. So, but that's what I thought it looked like to me.
How long were they roughly?
Probably like 5 to 10 feet.
Wow. Did you get close enough to see what kind of material was used in them?
It was like grass, like it was like mostly like kind of, yeah, it was just like long grass in the trees, like amidst the trees, like that was sort of just flattened down, and some leaves too, some like deciduous leaf trees, or deciduous tree leaves that were sort of squashed in there as well. Yeah, I have pictures. I can try and find them and send them to you.
I would love to see those. I mean, man, if that was an actual like nesting site for a group of Bigfoot, like, Riley, that's a really, really big deal. That's something that is super rare to find.
I hope that's what it was. I mean, it'd be pretty amazing if it was. One thing as well I forgot to mention was that when we started walking up that ridge right before Sean gave out his Bigfoot call, there was a Douglas fir like bough that was like spread across the trail, like spread right in front of us horizontally. And so it was like, it almost felt like if we step over this, we're stepping into their territory kind of thing. And I think I even mentioned that to Sean, and he was like, oh yeah, yep, that's what they do. They'll put down those little things to indicate, where their part of the woods is or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's, it made me slightly nervous to cross it, but we did. And that's when he made his call. And it was pretty amazing, because I was like, there was a small part of me that was like, is this dude pulling my leg? Like, but I know he wasn't, because one, like, that would have taken a lot of effort, because getting up, 8 feet in the air and breaking all those, branches and stuff would have taken a long time. And also, like, he's a good Christian man who I know wouldn't, lie to me if I straight up asked him, like, hey man, you're not messing with me. And he's like, no, this is all real. So, it was it was a wild experience to kind of feel like, oh my gosh, like, I'm in a place where these things apparently, at least at some points of the year, like to reside in. And if the whole rock being thrown at the car thing, like, showed that there at least was a member of whatever their people or tribe or creature group are, like, that was there, or at least it could have been.
Have you heard a sound that was similar to the one that Sean made when he let out a yell? Was it similar to any other Bigfoot recording?
Like the kind of yell he made?
Yeah.
I think he just he didn't try to do like the Ohio howl or something like that. I think it was more just like a like a crazy scream, like,
okay,
oh, like, kind of sound. And
gotcha.
That was he claimed, and I think I now understand why you're asking that, because I think that was just what he would claim they would. It sounded a lot like the recording he showed me, is what he was trying to imitate. Okay. I think.
Gotcha. Oh man, and was that like on an old tape recorder, or what kind of device did he have that on?
It was an old tape recorder, and the bummer part is because we have since moved away from Silverton. We were only living there for a year, and I have texted and called him a few times, and he hasn't gotten back to me. And like I said, he's an old fella, and he might even be in his early 80s, and I'm so bad with gauging the age of anyone over the age of like 65. Right. But like, he also had some health issues, and so I kind of felt like he was trying to sort of pass the torch onto me, but unfortunately we had to move away from the area, and that was the only time that him and our schedules, coincided for us to be able to go experience something together. But he would talk about how he would often, like, he said that if you wanted to hear a lot of noise, go out in the fall, in the autumn, because he felt like that was the time when their like mating season was going on. And he said if you want to see them more often, get out in the summer though. And what he said he would do often is make sure he had no like deodorant or cologne or man-made smells on, and then he would crush pine needles all over himself and rub them around, and then he would like go hunting style, like, out into the forest. And he said that often would sort of trigger more interaction with these things. His story was that one time the time he actually saw one was where it peeked behind a tree and did that whole like leaning out thing where they sort of have their arm on the tree and sort of peek out. Yeah. And he said that he saw it, he saw its face, and I asked him what the face looked like, and similar to what the ferry captain told me, he said it looked very much like almost like a Neanderthal, like just a very primitive human kind of face. But he said that this one had, ran off super fast, to the point where it almost made him wonder, like, did I just see what I think I saw, But yeah, that was sort of his experience.
What a special, I mean, that's a really cool experience that you were able to, even though it was just one time, just that is most people don't get to experience things like that. So that is very cool. You're able to go out with Sean. So that was 2021. Yeah. And then I'm guessing after that, you were kind of like, all right, something's going on here. Let's go for it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when later that same year that I was living there in Silverton, Oregon, me and him had tried to get together to go up again to that same area, and he let me know that he had previously gone up after our experience, he previously went up to go back to the area when he had some time off, and he said that the whole place was gated off. And I don't know if it's necessarily BLM land that we were on, or if it was like a private, like I think he said it was like private land, not private, well, like a private company's land that was open when we went, but like at that time it wasn't. And he said that from what he had gathered, like it basically was not a place where people were going to be able to go anymore. So that's super unfortunate and I wouldn't be able to re-find it again because it was just one time and I wasn't super paying attention to how we got there anyways. But at some point I'd love to try and, if I ever am able to get in contact with him again, I want to find out about that spot again and see if we can go back up there.
I just want to talk to the listeners real quick. Listeners, there's a big lesson right there where you never know how many times you're going to be able to go up to an area. So, just make a map, track it, whatever you need to do. You never know how many times you have in an area, but oh man, Sean, that is so wild, dude. So then what happened after that, man?
So, 2022 was the year that my younger brother got married. And the night before his wedding, we were originally planning to have like a bachelor party where we were all going to go camping, but unfortunately none of his of his buddies who were his other bachelors were able to make it because they were all out of state and they weren't able to make it until the day of the wedding itself. So it ended up just being him and I'm his older brother of 6 years. And so I was like, I want to make sure that he and I are going to have a fun, camp out together. So we actually that day had been surfing or hanging out with our family on the coast at Pacific City. And that everyone else had gone home. It was just him and I that were going to go find somewhere to camp that night. And so we drove over in more like a little bit more inland from Pacific City towards a town called Cloverdale, out on the outskirts there. It's on the, Oregon coastal mountain range. It's totally densely forested. And we found this area called the Lewis and Clark logging trails, I think is what they're called. And it said no camping, no fires. And we were just like, hey, we're not the type that are gonna set the forest on fire, and we don't even like drink or get rowdy or anything. So I think we're fine. I'm sure there are some listeners where that makes them mad, but that's what we just wanted to have a fun time. So we ended up driving my Volkswagen up the trail, and we get up to this ridge where we're not super far away from the highway, but we're far enough into the actual like forest up on this ridge where there's a telephone pole that's kind of on this up on the top of this ridge. And then we wanted to actually camp like in the forest itself because we didn't want like a ranger to come around and say like, oh, you can't have a fire, get out of here, and like ruin the night for us. So we kind of parked our car down this like dark trail, and we went down there to start making our fire. And this experience that I'm about to tell, I don't really know if this is fully Sasquatch related or if it's something worse, like because it was a kind of a dark feeling over for the most of the night, and I'll explain more. But we got down there, and I think I had pointed out that there were some of the little tree formations, but they looked more like they also could have possibly been more natural. But my brother he's somewhat interested in the subject. He's heard me talk about it a bit, and I was like, hey man, like could be Bigfoot stuff. And he's like, oh cool, yeah, it could be. And then he points out that there's these footprints, or not, well, they might be footprints, but they're definitely marks in the ground that are sort of leading away from where we wanted the campfire into the forest more. And we were like, well, are these footprints? We don't know. Like he put his foot, he's got like a size 10 shoe or so up to it, and it's about the same size as his shoe, but it's not really clear with whether it's, just old footprints from someone else, or because we can't really make out toes or anything. It was just these kind of footprints. So we were like, hey, getting all excited, like maybe it's Bigfoot stuff. And we ended up just having our fire, roasting some hot dogs and just chatting. And the sun goes down. This is all occurring in the end of August, beginning of September, at some point. And for those who haven't been out to the Pacific Northwest, when you're in the actual forest, and the sun goes away, I mean, even when the sun is out, sometimes it's like pitch black inside some of those forests. But when the sun goes down, it is dark, dark. So we decided to put the fire out because we were going to go to bed. But then last minute, we wanted to go up the ridge to go stargazing, because so often throughout the rest of the year, that's not the summertime in Oregon and Washington. It's very overcast, so you don't often get to see the stars fully clearly, but in the summer you do. So we're like, let's go stargazing up at the top. So he and I hiked up the ridge with just our flashlights, and we get up to that ridge and we're just like talking, and then out of nowhere my brother starts getting real fidgety and starts looking over his shoulder all the time. And I'm like, everything all right, man? He's like, yeah, I'm good. And we were just continuing our conversation. And then out of nowhere, he's like, dude, let's go to bed. Like, let's get to the tent. I'm like, okay. And we start walking back down towards the tent. And when we get to that trail that enters the actual forest, and we're starting to walk towards our tent, which is probably like 50 yards away from the top of that ridge down this trail, I take like 2 or 3 steps, and all of a sudden my flashlight goes out. It's a headlamp, and it like goes out, and then like 2 steps later from my brother, it goes out as well. And I'll call my brother Dane. So because I don't know if he wants his name out or anything, but anyways, I'm like, Dane, dude, what happened to your light? Like, both of our lights went out, and we're like, shoot, like they both died. It's weird. We had fresh batteries. And so we pulled out our phones, and my phone was at like 2 or 3%, and his was totally dead. And I was like, what the heck, man? Like, my phone was at like 60%. He's like, yeah, man, mine was at like 30 or 40. Like, it should not be dead right now, but they both were dead, or his was dead and mine was on for like 2 or 3%. I was able to turn on the flashlight and get us just all the way down to the tent before it also gave out. And we were able to get new batteries for our headlamps and plug those in and get, bedded down for the night. And so we're laying there in our tent, and it is like deathly quiet, like just silent. And for Oregon in the summer, that's weird, because usually you've got crickets, you got frogs, you got, owls, other birds and things like that at night that you'll hear. And for it to be this quiet, it was just really odd. And we had been both trying to sleep, and at some point I turned to him, I'm like, Dane, like, are you asleep? And he's like, nah, dude, I've been tossing and turning. I'm like, yeah, man, I haven't been able to sleep either. Probably a whole half hour had passed. And I was like, it's so freaking quiet. And he's like, yeah, it's almost like as if silence was a sound, and that we're hearing that. It's like it almost kind of muffled us in a weird way. We could hear one distant little creaky bug off in the distance, but that was not enough to like help us sleep or anything. And we were both laying there, and I thought to myself, like, dude, how crazy would it be if like something real freaky happened tonight, like there was a Bigfoot or something like that. And I had this like sort of imaginary thought of like this hairy hand getting like pressed in on the canvas of the tent. And it was like, ooh, like kind of weirded me out. Some people have asked me if they thought that was like a what's the word? Like a thought that gets an intrusion of your thoughts or something like that.
Like
and I don't know. I don't think. Yeah, like the mind speak thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it was. I think it probably more was my own imagination. But
I would go with that.
I don't. But right after I had that weird like thought in my head, I heard something walking over near our car, which was probably 20 feet away from our tent. And it sounded like it was something that was walking around on 2 legs. I thought it was a person. It didn't sound huge, but it sounded like it was definitely someone out there. And I was like, I whispered to my brother, I'm like, dude, is there someone near our tent or near our car? I mean, and he was like, he was like in denial. He's like, no, bro, no, that's nothing. I'm like, dude, that's something walking, because it started walking towards us from the car. I was like, dude, that's something walking towards our tent. And he's like, dude, holy cow, no, it's not. And like, I look over and he's like grabbed the hatchet, because I have a gun, but like I didn't bring it on that trip or anything. I didn't think I'd need it or anything. And so he grabbed the hatchet, and I think I had like a knife that I pulled. But as it's getting closer and walking towards us, I'm thinking like, okay, if this is a dude, like a person, like this is really weird. They should not be, approaching us like this. But I had this feeling, I'm like, if it's something, in the more, realm of the crazy, like a Bigfoot or something, like, then I'm going to kick myself if I don't, man up and try and actually see this thing. So I made the decision to grab my headlamp and then unzip the tent, right as it had gotten probably within a foot of where we were. And as soon as I unzip that tent and look out there, and flash my light, there's nothing. And that was the craziest thing, because whatever had walked up to us should have been within a foot from our tent, and I didn't see anything. And then within a matter of seconds, my flashlight, boom, goes out again. And me and my brother are like knocking our heads, trying to like freak out, trying to find the other flashlight. And we eventually finally do. And we're both like, what the heck was that? And we both get out of the tent and start like flashing our light around the area, being like, who's there? Like, what's going on? Like what is this? And nothing. We didn't hear anything or see anything like in that moment. And both of us had this, like, it was like this. The only way I can kind of describe it, I'm a spiritual person, like I'm religious and such. Like, it felt dark, which is like a bummer, because like I find the whole Bigfoot topic very fun, but like this, I was like, if it was Bigfoot, like this was an evil one, like this was a bad one, like this just felt like ugh. And we got back in the tent, and I was like, we were laying there trying to go back to sleep, I guess, and I was like, eventually said, dude, if you want to go home, like, I'm okay with it, and he's all being tough too, and he's like, well, I mean, only if you want to, if that's what you're feeling, and I could be down. And we were like, all right, let's go. So we get out of there, we collapse our tent real quick, we throw it in the trunk, we get in the car, and we start driving up that ridge, up where the telephone pole is, where we were looking at the stars. And my brother, when we get up there, we have our windows down this whole time, by the way. We get up there, and he's like, dude, I got something to confess. I'm like, what's up, man? And he's like, when we were up here looking at the stars, like, I swore I kept on seeing, like, shadowy, like, figures, like, just in my peripherals, like, and every time I'd look in their direction, they'd hide behind, like, a rock or a tree. And I'm like, what in the world, dude? Why did you not say anything? And he's like, because I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Like, I didn't want to ruin the night. Like, it's my bachelor party and stuff. And I'm like, dude, next time, if that is something you're suspecting at all, like, you got to say something. So we end up driving down the ridge back towards the highway, and when we get down there, like I said, our windows are open, and all of a sudden we start hearing birds, or not birds, but like, owls and crickets and frogs and all the normal night sounds. And we're like, dude, that's what night's supposed to sound like. What was up at the top of that ridge? And as we get down onto the highway, across the highway, there's more forest, and I see with my headlights that there's those broken tree branches again, like about 9 feet in the air, and they're all pointing kind of in the direction of that ridge. And I was like, dude, look at that. And he's like, my brother's like, dude, don't show me that. Let's just go. So we cruised home, and both of us had a pretty rough night's sleep. My brother to this day will not go back, he definitely feels like there was some dark entity or something that was in that area. And I, being the curious one, interested in the whole topic of anything strange, like, knowing this interview was going to come up just a couple of days ago, I actually went and tried to find the place again. Took me forever, but I did actually find it. Not actually it was actually kind of by accident. I ended up just saying, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to drive a random road, and I ended up finding it. And then I drove up again, and there was a gate there that said you can walk in, but you can't camp. And so I decided to just hike up there. Nothing happened, nothing crazy, although on my way back down, I did hear a raven kind of croaking the whole time on my way, partially on my way up and then partially on my way down. which I don't think is too weird. I just try to make sure I pay attention to everything. But then closer to where I was getting back down to the car, I did hear a little whoop, but like it was very fast, and it was only once, and I'm like, could have been a bird, I don't know, but like it was like a little whoop, and then I could have sworn I heard a little bit after that, like this sort of deeper sort of kind of sound, but it was further away than the whoop was, and it sounded like it was off in the trees more, and I was like, that could have been. It could have been just my imagination, I guess, or maybe, I mean, I definitely heard something, like, I don't know if that was Bigfoot either. So I'm always very like, try to think of anything that it could be other than just, because I don't want everything to be Bigfoot. I don't want to have that power of suggestion always be affecting me. You know what I mean? But it is hard to deny sometimes these circumstances where they seem very suspicious. So anyways, I left that area, and that's I think probably the craziest story that I have as far as all this Sasquatch stuff goes.
Yeah, I would say what would definitely do it for me was, first off, I mean, hats off to you for actually looking outside the tent, but having nothing be there is probably the craziest thing. That's pretty wild, dude.
Yeah, that was for sure the weirdest thing, because whatever was walking towards the tent, it should have definitely been there. There's no way a person or even a deer could have leapt away that quickly, like, because I could hear the gravel crunch a foot away from me right before I unzipped that tent. We had my flashlight out there, like, and it was just, there was nothing, and so it was just so spooky.
Have you ever looked to see if there's any other things that have been reported in that same area, since you know where the location is, like on BFRO or Bigfoot map or anything like that?
I haven't actually. That's a good idea. I haven't done that. I mean, it's what's crazy is it wasn't super far away from civilization. Like, it was on the outskirts of that town called Cloverdale, between the actual beach and that town, and it's just like some forested area, like, and right down this, I never thought of this till right now, actually. So the first house when you come off that highway that you encounter is this old barn with a bunch of chickens running everywhere. And I wonder, I almost wanted to, like, I wish I could have just gone and knocked on their door, like, hey, have you happened to have been seeing chickens go missing lately? Because that would have been, that would have been like the perfect spot for a Bigfoot to want to hang out, like, because there was just like probably like at least 50 to 100 chickens just in and around that barn, just clucking around and pecking food and stuff. So, and it was like right down the ridge from where that all occurred.
Oh yeah, it'd be easy food source. But I think something that a lot of listeners might not get unless they go out to Oregon, or something personally I didn't get until I went out there this summer, is how you can be in a town and you can just drive outside of the town and really not be that far away from it and have some really crazy stuff happen.
Well, I think, the whole western side of the state is just covered in, what we would call rainforest, essentially. Like, it's just, Douglas fir and white oak for, and other kinds of trees and stuff too, but like just all over, and lots of blackberry bushes that kind of make it harder for some, your average person to try and get to in certain locations. And it's just like, as soon as you get out of a city, like, because in Utah, for example, you get into the Salt Lake City area and you've got one town that just bleeds right into the next, and then it's like that whole like corridor down to like Spanish Fork area where it's just town after town after town, Provo, Lehigh, all those areas. But like Oregon is different. Like, you get out of a city and you try and make your way to another town, or from a town to another town, you're going through a lot of countryside and often a lot of forest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I was out in a small town called Oak Ridge, way out in the Willamette National Forest. And man, that area is just Bigfoot central. You can talk to anyone in the town pretty much, and everyone has a Bigfoot story out there. It's pretty sweet. But you had mentioned that Sean had also some like paranormal type Bigfoot stories as well that he had shared with you?
Yeah, it was one thing that I remember sticking out where this is I think probably one of the craziest things I've ever heard.
Okay.
Where and he said this too, and I actually do have one other slightly sort of paranormal related story that isn't Bigfoot, but it is kind of in that realm that I can tell you after this too. But
Sure.
He talked about how him and his buddies back in like the 70s were hanging out somewhere in that Silverton area out in the forest. And he said that like they were up on higher ground and they were looking down into this sort of valley, but like the valley had like trees and such. It was like forested. And he claimed that there was like, they saw basically a portal open and a green like shape of a human being or something, at least that had 2 arms and 2 legs, come out of it and then like sprint super fast up towards them, but like more to their right, and it kind of veered off to a different direction. And he just told me, he's like, I have no idea what to make of that. Like that was just the craziest experience. And you know, hearing it myself, I'm like, yeah, that is a freaking wild experience, because what do you do with something like that? Like what do you, I don't even know where to, what kind of place to start with when it comes to something like that, you know?
That's pretty wild. I was not expecting the portals to come out, but I'll tell you, I'm at the point where it's like pretty much all bets are off, and it's going to be interesting if someone in the comments is like they know who Sean and his old school buddies were in Silverton. I'm sure the comments are so crazy in these things. I'm sure someone will know. But guys, don't use his real name, but reach out to me. Wink, wink.
Yeah. It is pretty. I mean, that kind of a thing is something out of like Skinwalker Ranch, you know, like that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, what in the, like, how? Because I want to believe him, but I have no frame of reference to sort of where to categorize something like that. You know, I mean, I of course have a frame of reference in the sense that like, yeah, that sounds like something out of old, you know, fairy tales and folklore or out of a sci-fi movie, but like out of reality, no, like that's great. But like, you know, he already had been telling me about his Bigfoot experiences, and he also was like not really wanting to go into that, but I kind of pushed him and I was like, dude, tell me the craziest thing you've seen. And he was like, all right, fine. Like, you want to hear it? Like, this is the craziest. And that was his, and you know, you always wonder, like, was that really the craziest if he are, you know, or is there other things he's holding back with that many decades of experience? You know, I don't know.
No, it wasn't. There's no way it was the craziest. You probably would have had to hang out with him for a few more years to get to that point, I'm guessing. But
right,
still, that's pretty wild. So it was a green like humanoid, you were saying?
Yeah, he said it. The way he made it sound was that it was like a being of light. Like it was like it wasn't like a, you know, a lizard person or something like that, or even like a green alien. He said it just looked like the whole thing was like the shape of a human, and it was like just light, like vibrating green bright light, and this thing was made up of that, and it just ran out of the kind of the seam in the time and space or whatever, and then just ran off somewhere in the forest, like. So, yeah, that was the details he gave me, and that was, I didn't push too much further for more because that already was hard enough to try and like, grapple with. Where I was like, oh gosh, like that's freaking crazy. Let's get back to Bigfoot. That's at least somewhat normal, like, you know.
And the best part about this is just Sean is just an older dude who was into Bigfoot since the 60s or 70s, and like he's not trying to sell you a book or like, you know, anything weird like that. Like he's just like, dude, this happened, and I think that's the coolest part of all, really.
Yeah, he's just an old cowboy kind of guy living in, you know, living in Oregon with no no dog in the fight. No, he's not trying to push an agenda or anything like that. Like, so yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why I felt like I could trust him, because I was like, he's totally there mentally, like with it. Like, he teaches the youth groups at that church, like, he's, a trusted guy in the community and everything. And I don't know how many people know that he was into Bigfoot or not. But yeah, that's who he was.
That's legit. That is
right?
so legit. I mean, just we need more solid dudes that are also into Bigfoot as well.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. You were saying that there is you had maybe another weird story as well.
Yeah, and I'll try and keep this one brief, because I mean, I don't know. I know everyone's here kind of more for Bigfoot, but one time in high school, this would have been probably in 2010 or so. I grew up in Dallas, Oregon. So Dallas is just a few miles southwest of Salem, Oregon. And one time, me and my buddies were playing. It was either like Cops and Robbers or Fugitive, the kind of game where you chase each other in your cars and you run across the neighborhood and stuff. So there was this neighborhood called Bridlewood, and then there's another, like the rest of the actual outskirts of Dallas proper, that we were trying to get from Bridlewood to Dallas. And between those two areas, there's mostly just like a field and a cemetery. It's the Dallas Cemetery. And me and my buddy, who I'll call Brody, like, we thought it'd be clever to jump the fence into the cemetery to run away from one of our other buddies in the car, who was going to try and get out of the car and chase us. And so we heard our buddy, chasing after us. We jumped into the cemetery. We hid behind some headstone, what do you call those again? Tombstones. And we were kind of like catching our breath there. And as we started, we felt like no one was around. So we stood up and we started walking towards the other side of the cemetery to hop that fence to get into that field so that we could run through that to get to Dallas proper, where my other buddy's house was. So when we got up, though, both of us heard something or someone running towards us, so we assumed it was that same buddy of ours that we thought had given up, but that he must have snuck in or something. So we start running because we don't want to get caught. But as we're running, like, I turn around and I see this sort of, it's in the dark, but there are some of those like cemetery sort of lamps that are around, so I could just sort of make out something running towards us, but it didn't look like it was really a person. It was like on four legs, and both of us like were running in the same direction, and we kind of got separated, and this thing was still running after us. And I turned, and I could have sworn I saw like a flash of red. It almost seemed like it was like canine, and it was running at us, and there was like a flash of red in its eyes. And it was something big. I could tell it was kind of shaggy and black. I thought it was probably like maybe like a watchdog or something like that. But then when we actually get to the actual fence, we stop there and start to climb it, and this thing started running towards us. And when it gets to a point where it's in the shadows, it just seems to kind of disappear. Like we couldn't see where it went or anything. And we fall over the other side of the fence, and we both turned to each other. We're like in a pile of hay, and we're like, dude, what the heck was that? And my buddy Brody was like, dude, did you hear the drumming? And I said, what drumming? What are you talking about? And he's like, you didn't hear that? I could hear like this drumming coming from back there where that thing started running after us. And I was like, dude, let's just go. So we we got up and started running towards our buddy's house there in Dallas. And when we got there, neither of us, I don't think we even told our friends. We just kind of kept it to ourselves, and we're like, what in the world was that? I think we talked about it a little bit later that night because I wanted to confirm what he saw, and he as well felt like he saw a big black shaggy dog with red eyes running towards us, and then it kind of disappeared into the shadows. And it wasn't until like 10 years later when I was just hanging out, and that memory came back to my mind, and I was like, I just Googled like black dog, red eyes cemetery. And it turns out there's like this whole folklore about what they call in England, they call it the Grim, or the church Grim. And it goes along with this whole idea apparently where they used to think that the first person to be buried in a cemetery had to sort of ferry the souls to the other side. And so they didn't want to condemn a human to that. So they'd usually bury an animal, often a dog. And that thing would be sort of the guardian of the cemetery and would chase after you. And the description always is the same. Another thing they call it is the black shuck. And it's always a big black shaggy dog with glowing red eyes. And I was like, dude, this is crazy. So I sent that to my buddy, Brody, and he was like, dude, I think this is what we experienced. And then I remembered the drumming thing, and I was like, what's that about? So I started learning about, trying to find out what that was. And I learned about something that's sort of like a folklore motif called the wild hunt, which is like when all the sort of otherworldly creatures or beings come from the other side on certain nights, and they like march through, and they have like drummers in the back, and often like hellhounds or things like that will be accompanying it. And that whole thing was just really interesting, but I just thought it was, the whole drumming thing could have been maybe that, I guess, like, but anyways, like, it was definitely a weird experience. And every time that he and I get back together, we're always like, dude, you remember that time in the cemetery? Like, and we try and, piece together more details and things like that.
Dude, that's weird. That I kind of tap out at the Bigfoot stuff. That's the furthest I get. But
yeah, man. And once again, like that's all just folklore, man. Like that's all just mythology and stuff. But like I've got a strong background ancestrally, like in the British Isles, and so did my buddy. And so I'm like, could it have been something related in that way? Like I don't know. Like, but it was. Yeah, it was weird. I've never seen like ghosts or nothing like that. I've never had an alien abduction or other crazy things like that. That's the only other sort of thing that I'm like, that could have been a little bit wild, Oh,
absolutely. You have an interesting background. Have you ever, or what do you think Bigfoot is?
Oh, dude, that's the big question, right? Like, I started off, of course, like everyone does, thinking it was probably like some, unknown ape running around. And then I thought maybe the whole Gigantopithecus thing. But it didn't take long for me because for a long time I would sort of reject any story that I heard on podcasts or in real life from other people I knew about like there being anything that was sort of supernatural. I was like, nah, that's weird. But then I eventually started to realize, I'm like, wait a second, like, how come I'm cool with this idea that, that science already rejects, this idea that there's a giant wood ape running around? How come I'm cool with believing that, but not anything else, and I started hearing consistencies like the whole glowing orbs of light, which is apparently so common for people in their Bigfoot experience. And, that I started hearing more and more often, and other like aspects to their tales that, this whole idea that they can disappear at will. And these all things often align with certain Native American tribes and what they sort of believe Bigfoot to be, and not just an animal. So I started, I think, not too far into it, realizing I don't think this is just an ape. So it started making me wonder, like, well, what is it though? Because maybe it's like a relic hominid. I've heard people talk about that. It's sort of like a Neanderthal, Homo erectus, Denisovan kind of creature that just is a leftover from a bygone age. But that still, to me, I love that idea. I hope that's what it is, because that or an ape would be much more easy to explain and really cool. Because we at least have sort of a knowledge, a fossil record or something that can kind of corroborate that idea. But like, it just seems like there's a lot of other things that if we're going to take all of the stories seriously, like, or at least all the aspects of it and all the folklore that goes around with it, like, then I don't think it can be just an ape or a relic hominid. And I started looking into the whole Nephilim idea, and I think it's cool. Personally, I don't think that's as likely for me, in my personal opinion. It seems to me like a lot of the Nephilim giants and such were more human-like and less animalistic. Although there are apocryphal books like the Book of Jasher that indicate there might have been, when it comes to this whole idea of fallen angels coming to the earth and messing things up, that they had relations with animals too, and that could be where some of these ideas of centaurs and satyrs and all other kind of cryptid creatures could come from. But like, my own theological kind of belief system doesn't really, I don't find the argument of angels being able to procreate with humans to be that, I don't find that argument to be super compelling personally. So I've moved away from that. Started looking into the alien thing. I'm not as convinced by that either, although I do think it's weird that there are sort of UFO crafts sometimes that will be reported in connection with these creatures. Growing up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's very popular that people will have this folklore that Bigfoot and his like are actually descendants of Cain from the Bible, and that goes back to an old Mormon kind of folktale of one of the early church leaders in like the 1800s named David Patton, who had it's like a late third hand account or something of him coming across while he's riding his horse, something that's as tall as him while he's on his horse, and it comes out of the forest and covered in hair, and it talks with him, and he's rebukes him and tells him to leave. And this early leader, this early apostle, I think his claim was that he thought it was Cain, because there's this sort of idea that Cain never died. I personally, I think that was probably, if he did come across something, it was probably a Bigfoot, and he probably just projected his idea of it being Cain kind of onto the being of whatever it was. And people can go and look that story up. It's pretty easy to find. Just look up Bigfoot Cain, LDS or Mormon, right? Like, find something like that. But this has taken so long, but I've been thinking about this for a long time. The thing that actually I think is most convincing, or at least seems to have the most in common with, actually comes out of sort of the early beliefs of kind of the various European religions or pagan sort of beliefs, and it coincides a lot, I think, with certain Native American beliefs, which is they're very similar to what people will call the Fae. And I don't know if your listeners are familiar with that. That term comes out of Celtic folklore, which is basically the Fae is where we get the word fairy from. And I know people are going to roll their eyes and think, fairies and Bigfoot, this is sounding crazy. But like, fairies, we're not talking only like, pixies and things from Tinkerbell and stuff from Disneyland. Like, the Fae was the word that was used to describe like nature spirits and other sort of otherworldly entities that come from beyond the veil, essentially, into our realm. And like, during times of the year like Halloween and stuff is when, like, that time is when the separation between our world and another crazy world kind of becomes thinner, and these Fae beings, which I think it's kind of an umbrella term for anything that is like kind of unexplainable and strange. These creatures, whether they're Bigfoot things or like elf-like creatures, like from something out of Lord of the Rings or whatever, like or the Dogman werewolf stuff, or even if they are like actual little tiny winged fairies or whatever, like all those kind of things can be classified under this idea of the Fae. And there's a lot of weird folklore, especially with the whole missing 411 phenomenon with David Paulides, and a lot of like old what do you call them, like the early settler stories of Bigfoot and some of the Native American stories of Bigfoot. Like, there's all these weird commonalities where like these things are kind of like tricksters from mythology, like, and there's strange things like horses on certain people's property will have their manes sort of braided, and in the old European countries where these folklore beliefs were had, like in Wales and Scotland and Ireland and such, they would call those fairy braids or fey locks and things like that. But here in the United States and Canada, back in the day when those things would be discovered, they would call them Sasquatch braids or Bigfoot braids. So like, it's like a weird like coincidence that like they do some of these similar things, or that that this idea that they can come in and out of another reality. It's just really fascinating. I think if people were to start looking more into the connections between sort of pre-Christian beliefs of peoples in Europe and the Americas and other places, they'll start to realize that like the relation between Bigfoot creatures and then the Fae, and often I think the most classic depiction of the Fae usually is like dwarf and like goblin like little people, like little creatures. And I know that there's Native American folklore like the Pukwudgie and things like that that go along with that as well. So anyways, that's a really long explanation. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. That's a great overview of pretty much a ton of great options. And I'll tell you, outside of the podcast, I have a lot of conversations with different people, and that whole Fae/fairy thing to do with Bigfoot has come up more than a few times. It's very interesting to talk about. But have you ever read the 2-book series Where the Footprints End?
I've heard about it. Isn't that Timothy Renner's book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the chance to order it and read it or anything, but I've heard it talked about, and I know that he kind of goes into some of those ideas. In fact, I might have gotten some of my knowledge about the topic from listening to him talk about it.
It's probably, I would say, the best book resource for looking at Bigfoot through the viewpoint of paranormal related type things. It's pretty cool. So I would definitely recommend checking it out.
And the bummer part about my answer is that it's we still have no idea what it is. It's basically me just transferring, passing the buck, just transferring. Oh, well, we don't know what Bigfoot is, so maybe it's a Fae. Well, what's a Fae? Oh, we don't know what a Fae is either, but at least we kind of have sort of a category that maybe it can fit in, like, So, trying to figure out where that can fit for those who are Christian is always a fun ride as well, because it's like, all right, well, where does that fit in with my paradigm and stuff? So it's definitely something that it's a mind rattler. It's something, and I find all that fun to think about. I know some people, they're like, downright uncomfortable trying to consider anything that might be outside the realm of possibilities that they're comfortable with. But like, I think it's something that is good for us to wonder about and learn about,
No, I think it's good, and especially if you're reading stuff like, the Bible, and you realize, hey, there's weird stuff in here, and what's to say that the weird stuff stopped happening back in the day, and like there's no weird stuff happening now? Dude, there's still weird stuff happening now. We're just all too distracted. So
right, yeah, we're all looking at our phones and going to work day in and day out. That's something that I always find funny, is like, for those who are really skeptical about the Bigfoot thing, like I know members of my family that feel this way, where they're like, no, that's all silliness. That's all, there's no way that stuff's real. You've just imagined everything, then you've gone into the woods, basically. And I'm like, for someone who, because they'll often say like, well, I've gone out into the forest plenty of times and I've never seen a Bigfoot, or like they'll say like, I know hunters who've gone into the forest plenty of times, they never see a Sasquatch. Like, and I'm like, yeah, like someone who just drives to work and then comes home and watches Netflix, goes to sleep, and then drives back to work the next day, and then occasionally has a hike on a trail that everyone else goes on a Saturday. No wonder you're not going to see a Bigfoot. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, man. Oh, man, this has been a fun conversation. Went in a lot of different areas. I didn't think we would be going, but I appreciate you coming on, Riley, and chatting, and definitely keep me in the loop if you continue to get out there and do these little kind of checking out different areas. Let me know if anything ever happens in the future.
Yeah, man, we'll do. I maybe the next time, or if we have time right now, I don't know. But like my sister called me a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, sorry, and let me know that she saw one. So that was pretty mind blowing for me.
I mean, I got time right now.
Okay, sorry. I know. I was like, lob that out there, right? Yeah. But yeah, man. So I was just hanging out at dinner with my aunt and uncle and my aunt and uncle's place. I get a call from my sister who's currently out in Stanley, Idaho, at Redfish Lake, I think is what it's called. Red something or other. It's out. She's just working at a campsite place out there, and she's pulled over on the side of the road and she Skypes me or FaceTimes me or whatever, and she's just like, Riley, I had to call you because I think you're the only person who knows anything about this, but like I think I just saw something kind of weird. I'm like, oh boy, like I'm rubbing my hands together, like what did you see? And she's like, so I'm driving down the road and like, 50 yards in front of me or so, I'm like, why is there a gorilla in the road? And then she's like, and then I'm like, wait, there's a gorilla in the road. What the heck? And she said that basically looks like a gorilla on, 4 legs, kind of loping off to the right to go off into the forest. And it's like halfway across the road. And she's like, but then it stands up. And I'm like, oh wait, so it's a dude. Like, well, what's a dude doing out here? And then she's like, as I get closer, it makes its way into the forest, and then it's gone, and I can't see it. And I'm like, she's like, do you think I saw what I think I might have seen? I'm like, are you asking if you think? Are you asking if I think you saw a Sasquatch? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, I think you probably did. I mean, let's think about this logically. Like, there aren't gorillas in Idaho, and unless it escaped from a zoo, and you're in Stanley, that's in the middle of nowhere. You're not near Boise or anything. And then like, if gorillas can stand up on 2 legs, but the fact that you thought it was a dude goes to show that it looked pretty comfortable on its 2 legs, but the fact that you thought it was a gorilla before makes you think like, well, which one is it? It can't be both, or is it something that is kind of like both, which is, what a Sasquatch is. So I was like, what color was it? And she said it was really dark brown, which is super common to hear. And I was like, did you catch any details? She's like, no, I wasn't able to see like a face or anything. I was too far away. And I was like, well, if it was a dude and he was in dark brown clothes, he's wandering down the highway near Stanley, Idaho, in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, covered in brown clothes, like, and I was like, is there any trails around there to go hiking? She's like, no, I'm like off on a part of the highway that's just straight up wilderness. There's nothing else around here. And I was like, well, dang, like that seems like a really strange thing for a person to do if it's a person. So, yeah, that was really fun to hear because, now I have someone in my own family who not only is like, hey, this could be real, but they're like, no, I've seen one, like, and it was so quick and so fast for her that she feels like, yeah, it most likely was a Bigfoot, but like, it's not like she was able to like, examine it for a certain amount of time on a lab table or anything. So,
wow, dude, that's awesome. That is a really cool story too. It's because it's different than most of the ones you hear. Just, I don't think I've ever heard another one where it's like on all fours in the middle of the highway and then gets up and walks off. That's just, dude, that's legit.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I was like super jealous because I was like, that would be for me the ideal way to experience a Bigfoot is like in my car, safe, where I just see it and then it walks into the woods and I'm like, boom, I know they're real now,
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it because every day after that, I would be thinking, why didn't I have a, what's it called?
Dash cam?
Dash cam. Every day it would haunt me.
Yeah, right? Totally, man. Yeah. And she's not even like, I mean, she thinks it's she up to this point, my younger sister, she thought it was a fun idea. And and she indulged me whenever I wanted to tell her about what I'd been learning and according to all the lore and all that. But like, I still, even now, it's not like I don't think she's ever like tried to like listen to any podcasts or about it. For her, she's just like, yeah, that was kind of crazy. I guess Bigfoots are real. And she just goes on with her day, like
Wow.
different personalities. You know what I mean?
Yep, totally. Oh, that's cool though. Good stuff. Man, what a fun conversation. Any other things that you want to share, Riley, before we wrap things up, you think?
I'm trying to think. I mean, there's one other story that is from, and I won't even go into detail on these, but two other things I can mention is that my cousin and his buddy, they went down to Roseburg, Oregon, which is kind of close to Eugene area.
Oh, yeah.
Hot spot. And basically they were hunting, and they were that night, like they went out and they had already previously talked with the dude whose property they were on, and he was like, hey, watch out for Sasquatch out there. And they were like, haha, very funny. He's like, nah, I'm serious. And they're like, okay. And then so they go and are hunting, and that night when they were getting their fire ready, my cousin says that they heard like whoops, like these whoop whoop, and then they started hearing the chatter, like the sort of Sierra sounds kind of stuff.
Yep.
And he was like, dude, it was really weird. It was like, it sounded like they were talking in a language that we couldn't understand, and it was like they were whispering, and we could hear it, but we couldn't fully make out what they were hearing. And then that night, apparently my cousin just sacked out and didn't actually experience anything. He claims that but his buddy said that all that night they were bluff charging the tent. Like they had run out of the forest apparently and like skid to a halt right in front of their tent, and then would run off in another direction and then come back and like skid to a halt and then run off. And he said it freaked him out. And I talked with his buddy. That was the first thing we talked about when we met, because my cousin basically just said, Riley, meet Dan, meet Riley, Bigfoot, go, and we were like, okay. And so we were like just talking about that. But then, so that was a fun thing to hear about. That was a few months ago that my cousin told me that. And then the last thing was like the very, very first Bigfoot story I ever heard was that buddy of mine named Brody, his older brother, who I'll call Sam. Sam and his buddy were at Camp Merriweather, which is a Boy Scout camp on the Oregon coast.
Okay. And
their story basically was that they were hiking along at night when they shouldn't have, and they see this cow, and they're like, dude, have you ever been cow tipping? And they're like, nah, let's go try it so they start walking over to this cow, and they say that the cow stands up on two legs, and they're like, holy crap, it's not a cow.
Whoa.
And it's like in the moonlight, and they can see it clear as day, like it's got like, dreadlocks hanging off it. It's like this beast of a Bigfoot, and basically looks at him, and he says it runs off faster than a horse could run, and that scared him. And I was like, you're messing with me, man, growing up. And he's like, no, dude, I'll go to my grave. Me and his buddy Mike, like those are their names I'm giving them, but like they're like, yeah, dude, we'll go to our graves knowing that we saw a freaking Bigfoot. And I was like, okay. And I remember texting him after I got into this whole subject and be like, dude, was that a real story? And he's like, yeah, man, that was real. Like, and we're out of high school now. There's no reason for him to mess with me. Yeah. So like,
right.
Yeah, like we're both dudes with kids and, out of college and everything. And he was like, yeah, that was real.
The dreadlocks thing is weird because I've gotten that in reports multiple times too. And even out by there's a place called Spirit Lake out by Oak Ridge, Oregon. Some guys got chased out of there by what they said were Sasquatch with why am I just blanking out? Dreadlocks hair. And I used to think like, okay, how did the Sasquatch get dreadlocks? But then I'm just now thinking, well, okay, logically, if they can braid horse manes, then why couldn't they also
part of the folklore is real?
Right. Why couldn't they do both? I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, dreads do sort of form naturally if you're not showering and stuff as well. But like, if they're cool looking dreadlocks, usually they're on purpose, right? Like, so yeah, it's like they could definitely give themselves, as a style, I guess. But it was so funny to be talking about Bigfoot's hairstyles. But yeah, like, it could be. So anyways, that is literally everything that I had a little list on my that I wrote down on paper that I was like, I don't want to miss any of these. That they're all like, that's everything. That's all the interesting stuff I have. That's basically the most fascinating stories I think I'll ever tell anyone, all in one podcast. So
that's fantastic. I just want to say on the side, Roseburg, yes, is a definite hotspot. I took many Roseburg reports from when I was at Sasquatch Summerfest in Oak Ridge, which is a great festival that takes place out there now. Second year is going to be next year. I was at the first year just taking reports. But Riley, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. As I said before, definitely keep me in mind for if you ever go out and weird stuff happens in the future. But dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure, man. Yeah, it was a blast. Thanks for chatting with me and enduring the lengthy discourses that I probably unwantingly was giving everyone on your show.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
Her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. Shame on you.